I remember the exact moment I realized I was never really part of their family. It wasn't dramatic. There were no raised voices, no slammed doors, just silence. The kind of silence that wraps around your chest and squeezes until you can't breathe. I was standing outside my son's house on a cold November evening. The windows glowed warm and golden. Inside, I could hear laughter. The kind of laughter that only comes when family gathers around a table, sharing stories and passing dishes. But I wasn't inside. I was outside, in the dark, with my suitcase at my feet. My daughter-in-law had smiled when she handed me my coat earlier that day. She said they needed space. She said it was temporary. She said I would understand. I nodded. I smiled back. I told her I understood. But I didn't. What I didn't know then, what I wouldn't find out until much later, was that this wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't about space or timing or a busy season in their lives. It was a decision. A decision they had made together. A decision they had been planning for weeks. I wasn't wanted. And the worst part? They had all agreed. My son, his wife, even my grandchildren had been prepared for my absence. I stood there that night, watching their shadows move behind the curtains, and I felt something break inside me. Not loudly. Not all at once. Just a quiet crack, like ice splitting on a frozen lake. I had given up everything to be close to them. I had sold my home. I had left my friends. I had moved to a city where I knew no one, just so I could be near my son and his family. And now I was standing outside in the cold, realizing that all of it had been for nothing. This is the story of how I learned that love is not always returned. That sacrifice is not always seen. And that sometimes, the people you would die for are the same people who forget you're even alive. My name is Eleanor. I'm 68 years old. And for most of my life, I believed that family was everything. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone. My parents taught me that blood is thicker than water. That you stand by your family no matter what. That you forgive, you sacrifice, and you never turn your back on the people you love. I carried those lessons with me through my entire life. I married young. I had one son, Michael. My husband passed away when Michael was only 12. It was just the two of us after that. I worked 2 jobs to keep him in school. I missed sleep. I missed meals. But I never missed a parent-teacher meeting. I never missed a birthday. I never missed a chance to tell him I loved him. Michael grew up to be a good man. He was kind. He was smart. He went to college. He got a good job. And when he met Sarah, I thought my prayers had been answered. Sarah was beautiful. She had a bright smile and a confident voice. She seemed to adore Michael. And when they got married, I cried tears of joy. I thought I was gaining a daughter. For the first few years, everything was fine. They lived in another state, so I only saw them a few times a year. But we talked on the phone. We sent letters. I felt connected. Then they had children. 2 beautiful grandchildren. A boy and a girl. I flew out to help when each baby was born. I stayed for weeks, cooking, cleaning, helping with the sleepless nights. Sarah seemed grateful. Michael seemed relieved. I felt needed. But as the years went by, I began to notice small things. Little comments. Tiny moments that didn't sit right. Sarah would ask me to watch the kids, but then criticize the way I did it. She would say I fed them too much sugar. Or that I let them watch too much television. Or that I wasn't firm enough with bedtime. I would apologize. I would adjust. I wanted to help, not cause problems. Michael would laugh it off. He would say Sarah was just tired. That she didn't mean anything by it. So I stayed quiet. Then, 3 years ago, everything changed. I was living alone in my little house. My health wasn't great. I had arthritis in my knees. I was starting to forget things. Little things like where I put my keys or whether I had taken my medicine. One day, Michael called me. He said he and Sarah had been talking. They were worried about me living alone. They wanted me to move closer to them. I felt a wave of relief. I wasn't a burden. I was wanted. Michael said they had found a small apartment near their house. It was perfect for me. I could see the grandchildren whenever I wanted. I could be part of their lives. I didn't hesitate. I sold my house. I packed up 50 years of memories into boxes. I said goodbye to my friends, my neighbors, my church. And I moved. The apartment was small, but it was enough. It was a 10-minute drive from Michael's house. I decorated it with photos of the family. I bought toys for the grandchildren. I stocked the kitchen with their favorite snacks. I was ready to be the grandmother I had always dreamed of being. At first, it was wonderful. I saw the kids almost every week. I cooked dinners. I helped with homework. I attended school plays and soccer games. But slowly, things began to shift. Sarah started making excuses. She would say the kids had too much homework, or that they were tired, or that they had other plans. Weeks would go by without a visit. I would call. Michael would sound distracted. He would say they were busy. He would promise to come by soon. But soon never came. I started to feel invisible, like I was waiting by the phone for someone who had forgotten my number. I told myself I was being sensitive, that they had their own lives, that I needed to be patient. But deep down, I felt it. The distance. The coldness. And then, 6 months ago, Sarah invited me over for dinner. I was so happy. I thought maybe things were getting better. I brought a pie. I wore my best dress. I smiled the whole drive over. When I arrived, the house smelled like roasted chicken. The table was set. The children ran to hug me. I felt like I was home. But during dinner, Sarah was quiet. Michael kept glancing at her. There was tension in the air, thick and heavy. After the meal, Sarah asked me to stay for tea. The children went upstairs. Michael cleared the table. And then, Sarah looked at me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She said they needed to talk to me about something important. My heart sank. Sarah folded her hands on the table. Michael sat down beside her. Neither of them looked at me directly. I held my teacup, but I didn't drink. My hands were shaking. Sarah spoke first. Her voice was calm. Too calm. She said they had been thinking about the future. About what was best for the family. She said the kids were getting older. They had more activities. More responsibilities. I nodded. I didn't understand where this was going, but I nodded anyway. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. She said I was spending too much time at their house. I blinked. I set my cup down carefully, afraid I might drop it. Too much time? I only came when they invited me. I only stayed as long as they seemed comfortable. I tried so hard not to overstep. Michael finally spoke. He said it wasn't personal. He said they just needed more space as a family. He said the kids needed to focus on school. I asked what that meant. What did space look like? Sarah smiled again. That same smile. She said maybe I could visit once a month instead of every week. Maybe I could call before coming over. Maybe I could give them more notice. Once a month. I had moved across the country to be near them. I had given up everything. And now I was being asked to see my own grandchildren once a month. I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to cry. But I didn't. I smiled. I said I understood. I left that night feeling hollow. The drive back to my apartment felt longer than usual. The streets were dark. The city felt unfamiliar. Cold. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to understand what I had done wrong. Had I been too pushy? Too involved? Too much? I thought about all the times I had babysat so they could have date nights. All the meals I had cooked. All the times I had dropped everything to help them. And now I was too much. That night, I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the sound of my own breathing. In the morning, I told myself I would respect their wishes. I would give them space. I would wait for them to reach out. But days turned into weeks. And weeks turned into months. They didn't call. I called once. Michael answered. He sounded rushed. He said they were busy. He said he would call me back. He never did. I tried to stay positive. I joined a book club at the local library. I went for walks in the park. I tried to make new friends. But every time I saw a mother with her grandchildren, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. I missed my family. I missed feeling needed. Then, one afternoon, I ran into Sarah at the grocery store. She was with the kids. They were laughing, picking out snacks. My heart leapt when I saw them. I walked over, smiling. I said hello. I asked how everyone was doing. The children looked up at me. For a moment, I thought they didn't recognize me. Then my grandson smiled and said, "Grandma." I bent down to hug them. I asked about school. I asked about their friends. But Sarah's smile was tight. She said they were in a hurry. She said they had to get home. I offered to help carry the groceries. She said no thank you. I asked if I could visit soon. She said she would check the calendar. And then she walked away. The children waved goodbye. I stood there in the middle of the aisle, holding a box of cereal, feeling like a stranger. That night, I sat in my apartment and I cried. Not loud, dramatic sobs. Just quiet tears that rolled down my cheeks as I ate dinner alone. I started to wonder if I had imagined the closeness we once had. If I had been fooling myself all along. Maybe I was never really part of their family. Maybe I was just useful when they needed help. And now that the kids were older, I wasn't needed anymore. The thought made me feel sick. I decided I wouldn't reach out again. I would wait. If they wanted me in their lives, they would call. But they didn't. Weeks passed. Then a month. Then 2. I spent my days in silence. I stopped going to the book club. I stopped going for walks. I just sat by the window, watching the world go by. I felt invisible. Then, one evening in early November, my phone rang. It was Michael. My heart jumped. I answered immediately. He sounded cheerful. He asked how I was. He said they were planning a family dinner for Thanksgiving. He said they wanted me to come. I felt a surge of relief. Maybe I had been wrong. Maybe they did still want me. I said yes. Of course yes. He said he would send me the details. He said he would send me the details. For the next 2 weeks, I felt lighter. I had something to look forward to. I bought a new dress. I practiced recipes. I couldn't wait to see my grandchildren again. The night before Thanksgiving, Michael called again. But this time, his voice was different. Quieter. More serious. He said there had been a change of plans. My heart sank. He said Sarah's parents were coming to town. The house would be too crowded. He said maybe it would be better if I came the day after Thanksgiving instead. I felt the floor drop out from under me. I asked if there was room for one more chair. One more plate. He hesitated. Then he said Sarah thought it would be too stressful. Too stressful. I wasn't family. I was stress. I told him it was fine. I told him I understood. But I didn't. I hung up the phone. And for the first time in years, I felt completely and utterly alone. Thanksgiving came and went. I spent it alone in my apartment. I cooked a small chicken. I made mashed potatoes. I set the table for one. I told myself it was fine. That this was just how things were now. But when I sat down to eat, I couldn't swallow. Every bite felt like glass in my throat. I stared at the empty chairs around my table. I thought about Michael's house. I imagined them all gathered around their big dining table, laughing, passing dishes, holding hands for grace. And I wasn't there. I wasn't even a thought in their minds. That night, I didn't cry. I was too tired to cry. I just sat in the dark, listening to the silence. The day after Thanksgiving, I waited for Michael to call. He had said I could come over. He had promised. I waited all morning, then all afternoon. By evening, I realized he wasn't going to call. By evening, I realized he wasn't going to call. I picked up the phone. My hands were shaking. I dialed his number. It rang 4 times. Then it went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I tried again an hour later. Same thing. Voicemail. I told myself he was busy. That his phone was probably on silent. That he would call me back. But he didn't. 3 days passed. Then a week. I stopped calling. I felt something inside me shut down. Like a light switching off. I stopped hoping. I stopped expecting. I just existed. Then, 2 weeks later, I saw something that changed everything. I was scrolling through social media. I rarely used it. But that day, I was lonely. I wanted to feel connected to something. To someone. I went to Michael's page. And there it was. A photo. It was from Thanksgiving. The whole family was gathered around the table. Michael. Sarah. The children. Sarah's parents. Everyone was smiling. The table was full of food. There were candles. Flowers. It looked perfect. The caption said, "Grateful for family. Blessed beyond measure." I stared at that photo for a long time. They looked so happy, so complete. And I realized something that made my heart stop. I wasn't missed. They didn't need me. They didn't want me. They were perfectly fine without me. I had been erased. I scrolled down. There were comments. Friends and relatives saying how beautiful the family looked. How blessed they were. Then I saw a comment from Sarah's mother. It said, "So glad we could all be together this year. No distractions. Just us. No distractions." I read it again. And again. Was I the distraction? My hands were trembling. I wanted to look away. But I kept scrolling. There were more photos. Photos from the weeks before. Photos I hadn't seen. Birthday parties. School events. Weekend trips. My grandchildren had birthdays. There were cakes. Balloons. Presents. I wasn't invited. I wasn't told. I had missed everything. I closed the app. I set my phone down. I sat in the quiet. And then, for the first time, I felt something other than sadness. I felt anger. Not loud anger. Not the kind that makes you yell or throw things. Just a quiet, burning anger that settled in my chest and refused to leave. I had given them everything. I had sacrificed my home, my friends, my life. And they had thrown me away like I was nothing. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait anymore. I wasn't going to sit by the phone hoping they would remember me. I was going to go to their house. I was going to ask them directly. I needed to know the truth. I needed to hear them say it. The next morning, I drove to Michael's house. My heart was pounding. My hands were cold. But I kept driving. When I pulled up, I saw Sarah's car in the driveway. The house looked quiet. I walked to the front door. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. I heard footsteps inside. Then the door opened. It was Sarah. She looked surprised to see me. Not happy. Just surprised. She said, "Eleanor, what are you doing here?" I asked if I could come in. I said I needed to talk to her and Michael. She hesitated. Then she said Michael wasn't home. She said he was at work. I asked if I could wait. She didn't move. She just stood there, blocking the doorway. Then she said something I will never forget. She said, "I don't think that's a good idea." I asked why. I asked why. She sighed. She crossed her arms. She looked at me like I was a problem she didn't know how to solve. She said, "Eleanor, we've been meaning to talk to you." But Michael didn't know how. I felt my stomach twist. She said they had been discussing it for months. She said they felt like I was too dependent on them. That I had built my entire life around them. That it wasn't healthy. I stared at her. I couldn't speak. She said they needed boundaries. They needed to focus on their own family. She said it wasn't personal. But it felt personal. I asked if Michael felt the same way. She nodded. She said they had talked about it many times. She said he agreed. I felt something break inside me. I asked if I could at least see the children. She said, "Not today. Not today. Not ever." That's what she meant. I stood there on the porch, looking at this woman who I had welcomed into my family. This woman I had helped. This woman I had loved like a daughter. And she was telling me I wasn't wanted. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just nodded. I said, "I understand." And I walked away. I got into my car. I sat there for a moment, staring at the house. And that's when I saw it. Through the window, I saw my grandchildren. They were in the living room, playing. They didn't know I was there. They didn't even know I had come. I started the car. And I drove away. And as I drove, I realized something that made everything clear. They had already let me go. I was the only one still holding on. I drove home in a daze. The streets blurred past me. I don't remember stopping at red lights. I don't remember turning corners. I just drove. When I got back to my apartment, I sat in the car for a long time. I stared at the building. At the small window on the third floor that was mine. This place had never felt like home. It had always felt temporary. Like I was waiting for something. Waiting to be called back. Waiting to be needed. But I wasn't needed. I went inside. I closed the door behind me. I looked around at the walls covered in photos of Michael and the children. Every surface had a picture. Every corner had a memory. But those memories belonged to a version of my life that didn't exist anymore. I sat down at the kitchen table. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat there in the growing darkness. And I let myself feel everything I had been holding back. The sadness. The anger. The humiliation. I had given up everything for people who didn't want me. I had believed that love meant sacrifice. That being a good mother, a good grandmother, meant putting everyone else first. But what had it gotten me? Loneliness. Rejection. A life that felt empty. I stayed up all night. I didn't sleep. I just thought. And somewhere in those dark hours, something shifted inside me. I realized I had been waiting for permission to live my own life. Permission from Michael. Permission from Sarah. Permission to matter. But I didn't need their permission. I had spent 3 years in this city trying to be part of a family that didn't want me. 3 years shrinking myself. Making myself smaller. Quieter. Less. I was done. The next morning, I started making calls. I called my old friend Margaret. We had been neighbors for 20 years before I moved. We hadn't spoken much since I left. When she answered, her voice was warm. Surprised, but warm. She asked how I was. I told her the truth. I told her everything. She listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't judge. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Come home, Eleanor. Come back where you belong." Those words broke something open inside me. Come home. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that. Over the next few weeks, I made plans. Real plans. Plans for myself. I contacted a realtor. I started looking at apartments back in my hometown. Small places. Affordable. But mine. I reached out to old friends. People I had lost touch with. People who remembered me. Who cared. They welcomed me back like no time had passed. I started to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. I didn't tell Michael right away. I wasn't ready. I needed to be sure. But one evening, a month after that conversation with Sarah, I called him. He answered on the third ring. He sounded distracted. I didn't wait for small talk. I told him I was moving back to my hometown. There was silence on the other end. Then he said, "Mom, why?" I almost laughed. He really didn't know. I said, "Because I don't belong here, Michael. You and Sarah made that very clear." He tried to protest. He said that wasn't true. He said I was being dramatic. But I stopped him. I said, "I moved here because I thought you needed me. I thought we would be a family. But I was wrong. You have your family. And I need to build my own life." He was quiet. I said, "I love you, Michael. I always will. But I can't keep waiting for you to want me in your life." He said he was sorry. He said he didn't realize I felt this way. I believed him. I think he really didn't realize. But that was part of the problem. I had become invisible even to my own son. I told him I would send him my new address. I told him he was always welcome to visit. But I didn't wait for him to say he would. I hung up the phone. And I felt lighter. 2 months later, I moved back home. Margaret helped me unpack. Other friends stopped by with casseroles and flowers. I settled into a small apartment near the center of town. I could walk to the library, to the park, to the coffee shop where I used to go every Sunday. I joined a quilting group. I started volunteering at the community center. I reconnected with my church. And slowly, I started to feel like myself again. Not the version of myself that existed only to serve others, but the version that had her own interests, her own friends, her own life. Michael called a few times. The conversations were short, polite, distant. He never apologized. Not really. But I didn't need him to. I had already forgiven him. Not because he deserved it, but because I needed to let go. Holding on to anger was like carrying a heavy stone. It only hurt me. So I set it down. I don't know if Michael and I will ever be close again. I don't know if I'll see my grandchildren grow up. That sadness is still there. It probably always will be. But I've learned something important. I can't make people love me. I can't force them to want me in their lives. All I can do is choose to love myself. And that's exactly what I'm doing. It's been a year now since I moved back home. A year of rebuilding. A year of healing. A year of learning who I am when I'm not defined by being someone's mother or someone's grandmother. It hasn't been easy. There are still hard days. Sometimes I see a grandmother with her grandchildren at the park, and my heart aches. Sometimes I wonder what my grandchildren are doing. If they remember me. If they ask about me. But those moments pass. And I return to the life I've built. Last week, something unexpected happened. I received a letter in the mail. It was from my grandson. He's 10 now. The handwriting was messy. The spelling wasn't perfect. But every word was sincere. He said he missed me. He said he didn't understand why I left. He said he wished I could come to his birthday party. I held that letter in my hands and I cried. Not sad tears. Not angry tears. Just tears of release. He remembered me. He thought about me. That was enough. I wrote him back. I told him I loved him. I told him I didn't leave because of him. I told him that sometimes adults make choices that are hard to explain, but that my love for him never changed. I sent it with a small gift. A book I used to read to him when he was little. I don't know if Sarah will let him keep it. I don't know if she'll read my letter first. But I sent it anyway. Because he deserves to know he's loved. A few days ago, Margaret and I were having coffee. She asked me if I regretted moving here 3 years ago. I thought about it. Really thought about it. I said no. She looked surprised. I explained that even though it was painful, even though I felt rejected and alone, I learned something valuable. I learned that I am enough. Just as I am. I learned that I am enough. Just as I am. I don't need to sacrifice everything to prove my love. I don't need to make myself small to fit into someone else's life. I learned that boundaries aren't cruel. They're necessary. And I learned that letting go isn't the same as giving up. Sometimes letting go is the most loving thing you can do. For them. And for yourself. Margaret smiled. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She said, "You're stronger than you think, Eleanor." Maybe she's right. I don't feel strong every day. Some days I still feel like that woman standing outside in the cold, watching life happen without her. But most days, I feel something better than strong. I feel free. I wake up in the morning and I decide how to spend my day. I'm not waiting for a phone call. I'm not hoping for an invitation. I'm living. I'm living. I have friends who care about me. I have activities that bring me joy. I have a community that values me. And that's more than I had when I was trying to force myself into a space where I wasn't wanted. If I could go back and talk to the woman I was 3 years ago, the woman who sold her house and left everything behind, I would tell her this. Love yourself first. Not in a selfish way, but in a way that honors your worth. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot love others well if you don't love yourself. And you cannot find your value in how much other people need you. Your value is inherent. It exists whether anyone sees it or not. I wish I had known that sooner. I wish I had understood that my worth wasn't tied to being useful. But I know it now. And that knowledge has set me free. So if you're reading this, if you're listening to my story, and you see yourself in it, I want you to know something. You are not too much. You are not a burden. You are not a distraction. You are worthy of love, of respect, of a place at the table. And if the people in your life can't see that, it doesn't diminish your worth. It just means it's time to find your own table. Build your own life. And never, ever apologize for taking up space. Thank you for listening to Eleanor's story. I'd love to know what you think. If you were in her position, what would you have done differently? Would you have stayed or left sooner? Have you experienced something similar with your own family? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories and perspectives mean so much to me. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories about family, love, and finding yourself. Until next time, take care.